We live in a time when progress is louder than silence and busyness is praised as success. The modern world tells us that happiness is something we must chase, something we must build through wealth, achievements, possessions, and recognition. Yet beneath the surface of all this striving, people everywhere feel the same quiet ache. There is stress that never ends, bills that never stop, arguments that repeat like broken records, and a loneliness that no screen or purchase can truly erase. Many of us wake up tired, move through the day distracted, and go to bed restless. We tell ourselves tomorrow will be different, but tomorrow arrives and looks the same. This is not just one person's story. It is the story of an entire culture built on pressure, speed, and expectation. Think of the countless advertisements you see each day. They whisper that life is incomplete until you buy something more, earn something more, achieve something more. They tell you that you are not enough yet. And so we run faster, fill our schedules fuller, and measure ourselves against impossible standards. But the truth we rarely pause to face is this: the more we chase, the more we feel empty. The more we try to hold everything together, the more fragile we become. Beneath the appearance of control, we are drowning in anxiety, in doubt, in fear of losing what we have, or never reaching what we dream. This is where ancient wisdom meets our modern pain. For centuries, long before our world of constant notifications and endless comparisons, human beings suffered from the same cycle of craving and disappointment. The teachings of the Buddha did not begin as a religion to worship, but as a path to freedom, a medicine for the restless heart. These teachings remind us of something simple, yet radical. Peace does not come from adding more to life, but from letting go of the illusions that hold us captive. Where the world says grab tighter, wisdom says release. Where the world says become more, wisdom says just be. What you are about to hear is not philosophy for scholars. It is not theory to study in silence. It is a map for anyone who feels the weight of stress, the pull of money, the strain of relationships, or the shadow of anxiety. These 10 journeys are about real pain and real release. Each begins with the struggles we know so well: fear of loss, pressure of success, burden of the past, longing for love. Then each opens into a doorway, offering a way through mindfulness, compassion, balance, and insight. These are not promises of a perfect life. They are invitations to experience freedom within life exactly as it is. You may find echoes of your own story in what follows. You may feel that these words describe what you have quietly carried for years. Let that recognition soften your heart. It means you are not alone. Millions of people suffer the same, and millions have also found relief. If you allow these teachings to touch you, not as distant ideas, but as living guidance, you may discover what has always been within your reach: the possibility of calm, of clarity, of joy not bound by conditions. As this journey unfolds, you will be guided step by step. From the illusions of ownership to the release of the past, from the craving for the future to the discovery of the eternal now. Together, we will walk a path that begins in suffering but does not end there. For every pain, there is a teaching. For every fear, there is a way to let go. And for every restless heart, there is a peace waiting to be known. This is not a promise from me to you. It is a truth that has been tested for thousands of years, ready for you to experience today. And so, let us begin. We begin with something so ordinary, yet so powerful, that it quietly shapes our entire life: ownership. From childhood, we are taught to cling. A toddler reaches for a toy and cries out, "Mine!" A teenager guards their phone as though it were part of their body. An adult looks at the house they bought, the car they drive, the money they have saved, and believes these things are proof of worth. At first, it feels natural. We want to hold on. We want to protect. We want to build something solid in a world that often feels uncertain. But the more we attach ourselves to what we own, the more we are trapped by fear. Think of the favorite shirt you once loved. The fabric was soft, the color perfect, the fit just right. You wore it again and again until one day it tore or faded. Suddenly, the joy it once gave became a source of sadness. Or think of the new gadget you once craved. The moment you opened the box, your heart raced with excitement. But soon, a newer model appeared, and the same object that once thrilled you now feels outdated, almost embarrassing. This is the cycle of ownership. It promises satisfaction, but in the end, it delivers anxiety and restlessness. Deep inside, we know this. We know that everything breaks, everything fades, everything eventually slips away. And yet, we keep reaching, buying, collecting, holding, as if this time it will be different. As if this shirt will never tear, this car will never dent, this relationship will never change. We keep telling ourselves, if I can just keep what I have, if I can just add one more thing, then I will finally feel secure. But security built on what can vanish is no security at all. Imagine carrying a heavy backpack everywhere you go. At first, you feel strong. You think, this is my bag. These are my things. They make me who I am. But as the miles stretch on, the straps dig into your shoulders, your back aches, and you realize you cannot rest because you are too busy holding on. This is how ownership feels to the heart. Every mine becomes another weight. Every I cannot lose this becomes another chain. The Buddha taught that clinging is the root of suffering. Not because things themselves are bad, but because we confuse them with ourselves. We begin to think, if I lose this, I lose me. But you are not your shirt. You are not your car. You are not even your bank account or your body. These things are passing clouds, while your true nature is the sky. When you forget this, every change feels like a storm. But when you remember, you realize that storms come and go, yet the sky remains vast, open, untouched. Consider a person who treasures a porcelain cup. Each morning, they drink tea from it, admiring its beauty. Yet in the back of their mind, they fear the day it might slip, crack, or shatter. The cup brings joy, but also a shadow of dread. One day, a teacher tells them, every time you drink, remind yourself, this cup is already broken. Its end is certain. So love it while it lasts, without fear. Suddenly, the cup becomes lighter. Its value is no longer in how long it survives, but in the joy it brings now. This is not about rejecting all possessions or living in an empty room. It is about changing how we relate to what we hold. Instead of clinging, we can cherish. Instead of guarding, we can enjoy. The shift seems small, but it transforms everything. When you know that loss is natural, you no longer live in constant defense. You live in appreciation. You begin to see that the beauty of life is not in how long something lasts, but in the miracle that it exists at all. Ownership also creeps beyond objects. It seeps into our relationships. We say, this is my partner, my friend, my child. And in saying mine, we often forget that these are living beings with their own path, their own freedom. We want them to stay the same, to behave the way we hope, to fulfill our needs. But just like the shirt and the cup, they change. They grow, they struggle, they sometimes leave. And when they do, our clinging turns into pain. Yet if we can love without possession, love without making another person a part of our identity, then even when they change, our heart remains open. Why does this matter for you, here and now, in the modern world? Because ownership has become the very fabric of our culture. We are told our worth is measured by what we own. The latest phone, the biggest house, the newest car. Advertisements whisper that without these things, we are less. Social media shouts that unless we show our possessions, our vacations, our meals, we are invisible. Ownership has become not just a habit, but an identity. And so millions of people live in quiet panic, terrified of losing what they have, or ashamed of not having enough. But there is another way. Imagine walking into your home and seeing your belongings not as trophies to defend, but as companions on a short journey. Imagine drinking coffee from your favorite mug, knowing one day it may break, but letting that truth make each sip more precious. Imagine holding your child not as a possession, but as a miracle you are blessed to witness as they grow into their own life. Suddenly, every moment becomes sacred. Every object becomes enough. Every relationship becomes freer, lighter, more loving. This is the first door the teachings open for us, the door of letting go of ownership. Not by giving up everything, but by giving up the illusion that what you hold defines who you are. You are not the sum of your possessions. You are not the prison guard of fragile things. You are the awareness that can cherish without clinging, that can hold without fear, that can release without losing love. And so the question arises, if not in ownership, where does freedom live? If not in the things we hold, then in what can we place our trust? That is where we must go next, into the chains of expectation, into the belief that peace will only come tomorrow. But before we step forward, pause and feel the weight you have carried. Ask yourself, what am I guarding so tightly? And who would I be if I learned to let go? When we begin to see ownership for what it really is, the mind resists. It whispers, but if I do not hold on, won't I lose everything? Won't I become careless, empty, unmotivated? These doubts are natural. We have spent a lifetime being told that clinging equals caring, that guarding equals loving, that possession equals security. But pause for a moment and look honestly. Has ownership truly brought peace? Or has it tied your heart to constant worry, fear, and exhaustion? Think of the parent who buys their child a toy. At first, joy lights up the room. The child plays, the parent smiles. But soon the toy breaks, or another child wants it, or the child grows bored. The parent feels pressure. I must buy more. I must keep them happy. I must not let them cry. What began as joy becomes burden. The toy was never the real gift. The gift was love, presence, attention. But in confusing ownership with love, both parent and child suffer. This pattern repeats in every corner of life. You finally save enough to buy the car you wanted. For a week you are thrilled. But then you notice scratches. You worry about payments. You compare your car with the newer model your neighbor drives. Instead of freedom, you feel chained to insurance, maintenance, and jealousy. Or you find the relationship you longed for. At first, you feel alive. But slowly, fear creeps in. What if they leave? What if they love someone else? What if I am not enough? Love, once fresh and generous, becomes guarded, suspicious, anxious. Ownership has turned a gift into a prison. The Buddha did not deny the joy of life. He did not say we must renounce everything and sit on a cold mountain forever. What he showed is that joy dies the moment we cling. When we see clearly that nothing belongs to us, not our objects, not our titles, not even our body, we stop demanding that they last forever. We start to enjoy them as visitors, not prisoners. Imagine a garden. The flowers bloom, radiant with color. You could try to protect them, cover them, cage them, desperate to keep them alive. But the petals would wilt in the dark. Or you could sit beside them, breathe in their fragrance, and when they fade, plant seeds again. Which brings more peace, guarding or appreciating? The shift is subtle but profound. Instead of asking, how can I keep this? We ask, how can I meet this moment fully? Instead of clenching, we open. And when we open, something unexpected happens. Gratitude arises. Gratitude not for how long something stays, but for the miracle that it appeared at all. A teacher once said, "You can never step into the same river twice. The water that touched you a moment ago has already flowed away." Life is this river. Every possession, every relationship, every breath is already moving on. When you realize this, you stop trying to freeze the river. You begin to swim with it, to float, to trust. But letting go does not mean neglect. Letting go does not mean indifference. It means caring without fear. It means giving without demand. It means enjoying without needing to control. A mother who loves her child, but accepts that the child will grow, change, and one day walk into their own life, that is true letting go. A person who enjoys their home, but does not crumble when the roof leaks, that is true letting go. A heart that can laugh at the chipped mug and still savor the tea, that is true letting go. So where do we practice this? We practice it every day. When you lose your keys, instead of raging, you breathe and notice. Keys come and go, like everything. When your phone cracks, instead of despair, you remind yourself, nothing lasts and my peace is not in glass. When someone criticizes you, instead of clinging to your pride, you listen. Perhaps there is truth, perhaps not, but either way, my worth is not at risk. Slowly, these small practices train the mind. They teach us to loosen the grip, to see things for what they are, temporary, passing, borrowed. And in this loosening, space opens. The space to breathe, the space to love, the space to be alive without fear of losing. Ownership is an illusion. It tells us, this is mine, but in truth, nothing is ever ours. The shirt wears out. The house will one day crumble. Even this body will return to dust. When we accept this, a strange thing happens. Instead of despair, we feel light. Instead of sadness, we feel relief. The pressure to hold everything together falls away, and we realize, I do not need to own the world to belong in it. I do not need to guard life to enjoy it. Now ask yourself, if you stopped clinging, what would you gain? You would gain freedom. You would gain peace. You would gain the ability to love more deeply, because love is no longer chained by fear. You would gain joy in small things, because you are no longer demanding they last forever. This is the invitation of the path, to discover that letting go does not shrink your life. It expands it. And so, the illusion of ownership fades, and a new question appears. If not things, if not possessions, what else do we cling to? The truth is, we also cling to time. We say, I will be happy when I succeed. I will be free when I retire. I will be peaceful once the world slows down. We tie our hearts to a future that never comes. Just as we clutch objects, we clutch outcomes, always chasing the next tomorrow. This is where our journey naturally leads, beyond the weight of possessions, into the chains of expectation, into the prison of waiting for the future. For if ownership ties us to fear of losing, expectation ties us to fear of not yet arriving. And to see through that illusion, we must step forward together into the next truth, where freedom waits. If ownership ties our hearts to fear of loss, then expectation ties our hearts to fear of delay. We live not only with possessions, but also with plans. We imagine how life should unfold, and then we chain our peace to those imagined tomorrows. We whisper to ourselves, I'll finally rest when I get that promotion. I'll be happy once I meet the right person. I'll feel secure when my savings reach a certain number. I'll be complete when I achieve what I've been chasing. And so, instead of living here now, we live in a shadow version of life, always leaning forward, always waiting for something else to arrive. This habit seems harmless at first. After all, goals can inspire us. Dreams can guide us. But what happens when the future becomes the prison we live inside? What happens when today is never enough because we are forever saying, "Not yet"? The answer is suffering. We feel anxious because the future is uncertain. We feel disappointed when reality does not match our script. We feel restless even when good things come because our mind has already moved to the next "what's next?" The joy we imagine always slips just out of reach. Like a mirage in the desert. Think of the college student who believes, "Once I graduate, life will begin." Then graduation comes, and the thought changes. "Once I get a good job, then I'll be happy." The job arrives, but the mind shifts again. "Once I'm promoted, once I marry, once I buy a house." On and on it goes, each goal appearing like the horizon, always visible, never arrived. Life becomes a series of postponed promises. By the time one realizes this, decades may have passed, and the habit of waiting has swallowed the very moments that make life real. This is why the Buddha spoke of equanimity, the steady heart that remains unshaken by gain or loss, by success or failure. Equanimity is not coldness. It is not indifference. It is the calm strength of a tree with deep roots. Storms may shake its branches, seasons may change its leaves, but the trunk remains steady. When we cultivate equanimity, we no longer tie our joy to a fragile future. We participate fully in life, but we are not broken when outcomes shift. We move forward, but we do not place our entire soul in what has not yet come. Let's use an image. Imagine standing on the shore, watching the waves. One moment the tide rises, the next it falls. If you demand that the water only rise, you will be in constant battle with reality. If you demand that every wave arrive exactly as you planned, you will exhaust yourself with disappointment. But if you learn to watch the waves as they are, sometimes high, sometimes low, you can enjoy the ocean. You can swim, you can float, you can rest. This is equanimity. Freedom not from the movement of life, but from being enslaved by a dot in the modern world. This teaching feels almost radical. Everything around us screams that we must plan, predict, and control. Apps remind us of deadlines. Markets tempt us with dreams of future wealth. Social media shows us people who appear ahead of us, triggering the thought, "I should be there by now." Our culture rewards those who live in tomorrow. But if we step back, we see the cost. Anxiety disorders are rising. Burnout is everywhere. People have full calendars, but empty hearts. Why? Because the mind has been trained to live anywhere but here. Asterisk. But what if, instead of postponing happiness, we chose to anchor it now? What if we discovered joy not as a future prize, but as a present practice? Imagine sipping your morning coffee without rushing, without scrolling, without turning it into a task. Imagine feeling the warmth in your hands, tasting the richness, simply being there. That moment, so ordinary, becomes extraordinary when you allow yourself to be present. That is where true freedom lies, not in a someday that may never come, but in the only time that ever truly exists, this moment. Yet the mind resists. It says, if I stop chasing, won't I fall behind? Won't I lose my edge? Won't I become lazy? This is the same fear that keeps us locked in expectation. But here is the paradox. The more present we are, the more alive, focused, and capable we become. A scattered mind achieves less, even if it runs faster. A steady mind achieves more, because it is clear, calm, and grounded. Equanimity is not the enemy of success. It is the soil from which true success can grow without poisoning us with endless stress. Consider two workers. One spends every day obsessed with the next promotion. They work long hours, sacrifice health, miss family moments, all for a future reward. Even when they succeed, the joy lasts only a moment before the next expectation rises. The other works with dedication, but also with presence. They give full attention to today's task. They rest when it is time. They enjoy small moments of connection. Success may or may not come, but their life itself is success because it is lived. Who is truly free? The truth is, expectations are like invisible chains. We cannot see them, but we feel their pull. They tell us life must unfold a certain way, or we are not enough. They convince us that joy is always later, never now. And yet, when we look closely, we see that the future is nothing but a thought. It does not exist anywhere outside the mind. All we ever have is this breath, this step, this conversation. When we return to this reality, the chains loosen. We remember, peace is not waiting somewhere ahead. Peace is possible right here. This is not to say we should abandon goals or stop dreaming. Goals can guide us, but they must not own us. Dreams can inspire, but they must not enslave. The teaching invites balance. Move toward the future, but live in the present. Plant seeds, but do not suffer while waiting for the harvest. Care for your path, but do not believe that your worth is measured by the distance traveled. That is equanimity in action. So pause now and ask yourself, what expectations bind me? Do I tell myself, I'll rest once this project ends? Do I whisper, I'll be enough once I'm loved, once I'm rich, once I'm perfect? Do I live today as if it is only a waiting room for tomorrow? Notice how heavy that is. Notice how it steals your joy. And then imagine releasing it, even for a moment. Imagine saying, this moment, as it is enough. I am already here. I am already alive. That simple shift is liberation. As we walk deeper into this journey, we see a pattern. Ownership ties us to things, expectation ties us to time. Both leave us restless. Both keep us from peace. And so the path invites us to something different, something quieter, but far more powerful. Simplicity. Not the simplicity of deprivation, but the simplicity of clarity. For after we loosen the grip on possessions and release the prison of expectations, we discover a deeper hunger, one, not for more, but for less. A hunger for stillness, for space, for freedom from the endless noise. That is where we will go next. When we begin to loosen our grip on expectations, something strange happens. The mind, so used to running, does not know how to rest. It twitches like a restless animal, searching for the next what if. It whispers, surely I cannot stop here. Surely I must keep planning, predicting, preparing. But if we look honestly, we see the cost of this endless reaching. We are never truly present, never truly alive, because our minds are always leaning forward, chasing a future that has not arrived. This chasing takes many shapes. For some, it is career. They measure their worth by titles and promotions, telling themselves, once I reach that office, then I will feel secure. For others, it is relationships. They believe, once I meet the right person, then I will finally feel whole. For many, it is money. Once my account reaches that number, then I will relax. Yet notice how each of these promises is conditional. Notice how each postpones joy. And notice how, when the goal is finally reached, the mind rarely stops. It simply shifts the horizon. It demands more. The Buddha described this cycle as a wheel. It spins endlessly, carrying us from one craving to another, from one expectation to the next. We tell ourselves, just one more turn, just one more accomplishment, and then I will be free. But the wheel never stops on its own. It keeps spinning until we step off, until we recognize that happiness cannot be postponed into the future, because the future is never here. Only now is here. Only now is real. Consider the story of a man chasing a rainbow. He runs across fields, climbs hills, swims rivers, always convinced that the pot of gold lies just over the next ridge. Yet the rainbow moves as he moves. It is beautiful, but it cannot be caught. Finally, exhausted, he sits down. In that stillness, he notices the grass beneath his feet, the sky above his head, the breath in his chest. And in that moment, he realizes the treasure was never at the rainbow's end. It was always here, in the simple miracle of being alive. This is the truth of equanimity. It is not about giving up goals, but about refusing to let them steal the present. It is about rooting ourselves so deeply in the now that no storm of expectation can uproot us. When we stop believing happiness is elsewhere, we begin to notice that happiness has always been here. In the laughter of a friend, in the warmth of sunlight, in the quiet rhythm of breath. These moments do not require perfection. They only require presence, but presence is a discipline. It does not come automatically in a culture built on distraction. We are surrounded by reminders of what we should be chasing. Advertisements, social comparisons, deadlines. To cultivate presence, we must practice. One way is through the breath. Each time the mind drifts into the future, we return to the inhale and the exhale. We remind ourselves, here I am. Another way is through gratitude. Each day, we pause to notice one simple thing we appreciate. Now, not tomorrow, not someday, but now. Over time, these small practices build the muscle of equanimity, teaching the mind that it does not need to run. And what happens when we stop running? We begin to see clearly. We begin to notice the richness already around us. The child's smile, the taste of water when we are thirsty, the sound of wind in the trees. These are not small things. They are life itself. Yet we miss them when our eyes are fixed on tomorrow. By releasing expectation, we reclaim them. We reclaim the life that was always ours to live. This does not mean life becomes easy. Challenges still come. Loss still arrives. The future remains uncertain. But when the heart is steady, these storms no longer destroy us. We feel the waves, but we are not drowned. We experience disappointment, but we are not shattered. We may stumble, but we no longer believe our worth depends on never falling. Equanimity gives us resilience, the strength to face life as it is, without needing it to match our script. Think of a musician playing jazz. If they demand the music follow a rigid score, they will be frustrated by every surprise. But if they accept improvisation, if they welcome the unexpected, then every note becomes an opportunity. Life is like jazz. It rarely follows the sheet we write. But when we release expectation, we can dance with it, flow with it, even find beauty in its unexpected turns. So pause again and reflect. What future are you waiting for before you allow yourself to breathe? What script have you written that says, only when this happens will I be enough? Notice how heavy that belief feels. Notice how it pulls you out of this moment. And then imagine letting it go. Imagine saying, I will still walk toward my goals, but I will not chain my joy to them. I will live here, in this breath, in this step, in this now. That is the doorway to peace. And as we step through that doorway, something else begins to stir. When the clutter of possessions loosens and the burden of expectation softens, the heart begins to hunger for something quieter, simpler, truer. Not more, but less. Not louder, but clearer. This hunger is not for deprivation, but for simplicity, a simplicity of mind, of heart, of life. For when the noise of ownership and the chains of the future fall away, what remains is the space to simply be. This is where our journey leads next, into the art of inner simplicity. Not as a slogan, not as minimalism sold in glossy magazines, but as a deep spiritual practice. A practice that clears the mind, unclenches the heart, and reveals the freedom that was hidden all along. There comes a moment, after letting go of possessions and softening our grip on expectations, when the heart begins to feel a quiet yearning. It is not the hunger for more, but the longing for less. Less noise, less weight, less clutter inside and outside. This longing is the call of inner simplicity. In a world that constantly pushes us to accumulate, to upgrade, to prove ourselves, this call feels like a whisper against a storm. But when we hear it, even faintly, we know it carries truth. What is simplicity? Many think it means living with only a few things, perhaps moving into a small cabin, or discarding most of their belongings. But true simplicity is deeper. It is not about counting how many items you own. It is about lightening the heart. It is about clearing the mind of the endless tracking, comparing, and proving. You could live in a mansion and still have simplicity if your heart is uncluttered. You could live in a bare room and still be restless if your mind is crowded with fear and craving. Think of a desk covered with papers, books, devices, wires. You sit down to work, but your attention is scattered. Each object pulls you. Each reminder distracts you. Now imagine clearing the desk until only one notebook and a pen remain. Suddenly, your mind feels spacious. You can focus. You can breathe. This is what inner simplicity does for the heart. It clears the desk of our soul, leaving space for what truly matters. But our culture resists this. Every advertisement tells us, you need more. Every platform suggests, you are not enough yet. Simplicity does not make money for corporations, so the world teaches the opposite: complexity, accumulation, endless consumption. And so we are trained to confuse fullness with meaning. We fill our closets, our calendars, our minds, and still feel empty. Why? Because quantity cannot replace quality. More does not always mean deeper. In fact, often it means less real, less alive. Consider the person who owns 50 pairs of shoes. They may feel pride, but they also feel pressure. Which to wear, how to store them, how to keep up with the trends. Now consider the person who owns 2 pairs, both chosen with care, both worn with gratitude. Who is freer? Who is lighter? The one with less, not because of numbers, but because their relationship to things is clear. They are not enslaved by choice, by maintenance, by endless comparison. And the same is true for the mind. Many of us carry thoughts like clutter in an attic, old regrets, self-criticism, endless shoulds and musts. We replay arguments from years ago. We hold grudges like dusty boxes we cannot throw away. We imagine every possible future, every failure, every scenario, and we crowd our inner space with noise. Then we wonder why we cannot feel peace. The answer is simple. There is no room for peace to enter. The attic is too full. Simplicity means opening the attic window, letting in fresh air, and slowly, gently, deciding to put down what no longer serves us. We do not need to carry every regret. We do not need to replay every mistake. We do not need to meet every expectation the world demands. Simplicity is the courage to say, I will not live in clutter, inside or out. I will choose clarity. I will choose presence. There is an old story of a Zen teacher pouring tea into a student's cup. He keeps pouring even after the cup is full, until the tea spills everywhere. The student cries, "Stop. The cup is already full." The teacher replies, "Just like your mind. Until you empty it, I cannot teach you anything new." This is simplicity. Emptying so that something fresh can enter. Emptying not into nothingness, but into space, into possibility, into freedom. And simplicity is not only about objects or thoughts. It is also about the pace of life. Many of us run from morning until night, filling every minute with tasks, messages, updates, responsibilities. We believe slowing down means falling behind. Yet ask yourself, behind what? Who is truly measuring? And even if someone else moves faster, what is the prize for winning a race you did not choose? The cost of speed is presence. The cost of endless motion is that we miss the stillness where life's beauty is actually seen. Imagine two friends walking through a forest. One rushes ahead, focused on reaching the end of the trail. They arrive quickly, but remember little. The other walks slowly, noticing the sunlight on the leaves, the song of birds, the scent of pine. They arrive later, but with a heart full of wonder. Who has truly walked the forest? The one who was simple, not rushed, not obsessed with the goal, but open to the journey. This is what inner simplicity invites us to do with our entire life. To stop running blindly, to pause, to breathe, to notice. To choose less noise so we can hear more clearly. To choose less clutter so we can feel more deeply. To choose less distraction so we can live more fully. But again, the mind resists. It says, if I let go, will I become empty? Will I lose my edge? Will people think I am unambitious, weak, strange? Yet simplicity is not weakness. Simplicity is strength. It is the discipline to know what matters and to release what does not. It is the wisdom to choose depth over surface, quality over quantity, peace over performance. And those who live with simplicity do not withdraw from life. They taste it more fully. So how do we begin? Not by discarding everything overnight, but by asking gentle questions. Do I really need this? Does this add to my life or weigh me down? Is this thought useful or is it noise? Is this activity nourishing or is it only habit? Little by little, as we ask these questions, clarity grows. We begin to see which things are tools and which are chains. We begin to see which thoughts are guides and which are prisons. And we choose to keep only what serves freedom. Simplicity is not about having nothing. It is about having what matters. It is about creating space for joy, for presence, for love. And once we taste this space, we realize it is richer than any possession, brighter than any expectation, freer than any achievement. We realize that life was never about filling ourselves with more. It was always about uncovering the vastness that was already here, hidden beneath the cluttered dot. And so, as we step further into this journey, simplicity becomes not just a practice, but a doorway into presence, into clarity, into freedom. A doorway that invites us to live not in the noise of what we own or the chains of what we expect, but in the quiet beauty of what is here. And through that doorway, we will find the strength to face the heaviest burden of all, the burden of who we think we should be. That is the next step of our path. Simplicity begins as a gentle whisper, but with practice, it grows into a steady rhythm. When we allow ourselves to release what does not serve us, life itself becomes lighter. Yet, it is not always easy to stay on this path. The world will continue to call us back into complexity. New gadgets will promise to make us whole. New trends will insist that we keep up. Even within our own minds, old habits will return, saying, just a little more, just one more thing, just one more goal. But simplicity is not about never being tempted again. It is about learning how to return. Every day, we are given the choice to return. To return to breath, to gratitude, to the quiet clarity of enough. It may feel small, but every return is an act of freedom. Every time we pause instead of rushing, every time we release instead of grasping, every time we choose presence instead of distraction, we step deeper into simplicity. Think of a glass of muddy water. If you stir it constantly, the water remains cloudy and you cannot see through. But if you set the glass down and leave it still, the dirt slowly sinks and the water becomes clear. This is the gift of simplicity. It is the stillness that lets the mud of life settle. It is the clarity that comes when we stop stirring everything, when we stop trying to control every detail. In that clarity, we see ourselves more clearly. We see life more truly. Simplicity is not passive. It is not giving up on life. It is choosing wisely, living with intention. A simple life may still include work, family, responsibility, even ambition. But each is approached without clutter, without the desperate need to prove or possess. A simple life is not empty. It is full of meaning. Take, for example, a family meal. In complexity, everyone is distracted. Phones buzz on the table. Television plays in the background. Minds are elsewhere. Food is eaten quickly, without attention, without gratitude. The meal becomes just another task. In simplicity, the same meal transforms. Phones are put away. Attention is given to taste, to conversation, to laughter. The food becomes sacred. The moment becomes alive. Nothing has changed except the choice to be simple, to be present. And yet, the experience is completely different. Simplicity also gives us courage. When we are weighed down by possessions, by expectations, by clutter, we are easily shaken. But when we live simply, we are not tied to so many fragile things. We can bend without breaking. We can lose without being destroyed. Because we are not defined by the extra layers, we are anchored in what is essential. And what is essential? Not the objects we collect, not the image we project, not the endless comparisons we chase. What is essential is love. What is essential is presence. What is essential is awareness, the ability to truly see, to truly feel, to truly live. Everything else is decoration. Beautiful, perhaps, but not the foundation. This truth can feel frightening at first. To imagine letting go of clutter, to imagine not chasing the next purchase or the next upgrade, can feel like stepping into emptiness. But soon we discover the opposite. Simplicity does not leave us with less. It reveals that we already had more than enough. It teaches us that joy was never hidden in the next item or the next achievement. Joy was always here, waiting beneath the noise. And once we experience even a taste of this joy, we realize how much of our suffering was self-made, how much of our exhaustion came not from life itself, but from the clutter we carried. Like someone who has been holding heavy bags for years and finally sets them down, we feel relief, we feel space, we feel new strength. This is why the practice of inner simplicity is more than lifestyle. It is liberation. It frees us from the endless proving, from the constant racing, from the suffocating need for more. It invites us back to the truth that life itself, as it is sacred. That being present, uncluttered, open, is more valuable than all the trophies the world can offer. But to live this way, we must face a deeper layer of attachment. Beneath possessions and expectations, there is something even heavier. The self we think we must be. The shoulds we carry about who we are, how we appear, what we achieve. These invisible demands often weigh more than any object or calendar. And unless we learn to release them, even simplicity will feel incomplete. So as we close this doorway of simplicity, we begin to sense the next threshold. A threshold where the struggle is not with things outside us, but with the image we carry within. The pressure to be perfect, to be strong, to be always enough. This is the next great burden to release. For once we see through the shoulds of self, we step into a freedom deeper than any possession could ever offer. Beneath the clutter of possessions and the weight of expectations lies an even heavier burden, the image of who we believe we should be. These shoulds are not written on paper or stored in closets. They live deep in the mind, whispering constantly, shaping how we see ourselves. I should be stronger by now. I should be happier. I should be successful. I should never fail. These invisible rules become chains, binding us not to reality, but to an endless standard of who we think we ought to be. It begins early. A child hears, "You should be more polite. You should be better at school. You should be like your sibling." Slowly, they learn that love feels conditional, that worth feels fragile. that who they are is never quite enough. As they grow, the voices multiply. Teachers, friends, employers, even strangers online all contribute to the list of shoulds. By adulthood, many of us carry an entire library of self-expectations. And under their weight, every present moment feels incomplete. This is the tragedy of the shoulds. They turn life into a constant rehearsal for a performance that never arrives. They make us feel like projects to be fixed, not beings already whole. Instead of experiencing this moment, we judge it. Instead of inhabiting ourselves, we critique ourselves. And the more we try to meet these expectations, the more they multiply, leaving us exhausted, ashamed, and disconnected from our true nature. Think of a person standing in front of a mirror. They look at their reflection, but do not see themselves. They see a list of flaws. They think, I should be thinner. I should look younger. I should seem more confident. The mirror becomes a courtroom, and the verdict is always guilty. No matter what they achieve, the voice says, not enough. Not yet. Do better. This is the cruelty of the shoulds. They offer no finish line. They only demand, and yet, when we pause and look closely, we see the truth. These shoulds are not facts. They are stories. They are learned scripts passed down by culture, family, comparison, and fear. They are not the voice of reality. They are echoes of conditioning. And because they are learned, they can be unlearned. The Buddha invited us to see through these illusions. He taught that suffering often comes not from what is, but from what we believe should be. We suffer not because the present is unbearable, but because we demand it match our fantasy. We suffer not because we are inadequate, but because we believe we must become something else to be worthy. The practice is not to fix ourselves, but to see that we were never broken. Imagine carrying a heavy backpack filled with bricks. Each brick is a should. One says, I should be more successful. Another says, I should never make mistakes. Another says, I should always make everyone happy. You carry this weight every day, wondering why life feels so hard. One day, a teacher asks you to open the backpack. You take out a brick, read its label, and realize this is just a belief, not reality. You set it down. Then another and another. With each brick removed, the backpack grows lighter. And at last, you realize you were never meant to carry them at all. This is what it means to release the shoulds. It does not mean becoming passive. It does not mean giving up on growth or improvement. It means stepping out of war with ourselves. It means treating ourselves not as problems to be solved, but as lives to be lived. It means meeting the present, not with judgment, but with compassion. Compassion is the antidote to the shoulds. Where the inner critic says, you should be better, compassion says, you are already worthy. Where the should demands perfection, compassion accepts imperfection as part of being human. Compassion does not excuse harmful behavior, but it transforms how we relate to ourselves. Instead of whipping ourselves into shape, we care for ourselves into wholeness. Think of a friend who is struggling. If you tell them, you should be stronger, you should be over this by now, their pain deepens. But if you say, it's okay, I see you, I'm here with you, their heart softens. We know this truth for others, but we forget it for ourselves. We offer compassion outward, but inward we offer only judgment. The practice is to turn the same kindness inward, to treat ourselves as we would treat a dear friend. This shift is not easy because the shoulds are persistent. They will return whispering. If you let go, you will become lazy. If you accept yourself, you will never grow. But this is another illusion. True growth comes not from shame, but from love. A plant grows not because it is yelled at, but because it is nurtured. In the same way, we grow when we are cared for, not when we are constantly criticized. So ask yourself now, What shoulds do I carry? Whose voice am I still obeying? Do I demand perfection in every role? Do I compare myself endlessly to others? Do I tell myself I am not allowed to rest until I have earned it? Notice how heavy these beliefs are. Notice how they crush joy. And imagine setting them down one by one. Imagine whispering to yourself, I am enough in this moment. I am allowed to be human. I am allowed to be imperfect and still worthy of love. This is freedom. Not the freedom of becoming someone else, but the freedom of being fully yourself. The freedom to laugh without worrying if you look silly. The freedom to cry without apologizing. The freedom to rest without guilt. The freedom to live without constantly editing your existence. And this freedom has ripple effects. When we release the shoulds for ourselves, we release them for others. We stop demanding that our children, partners, or friends live up to impossible expectations. We begin to see them as they are, not as they should be. This opens the door to real connection, real love, real compassion. For how can we love someone fully if we are always wishing they were different? Only when we let go of shoulds can love become unconditional. But this journey does not end here. For even as we soften the weight of possessions, expectations, and self-demands, another trap waits, the trap of extremes. The mind loves to swing from one side to another, from indulgence to denial, from striving to avoiding, from obsession to neglect. We believe the answer must lie in one extreme or the other. Yet wisdom reminds us that true peace is not found at the edges, but in the balance between them. This is the next lesson, the middle way. When we begin to loosen the shoulds of self, the mind often resists. It asks, but if I don't push myself with expectations, won't I become weak? Won't I lose ambition? Won't I drift through life without direction? These fears are natural, because for so long we have been trained to believe that self-criticism is the only path to growth. But pause and ask, has judgment truly freed you? Has the endless voice of not enough brought peace? Or has it kept you trapped in shame, constantly chasing a standard that shifts each time you approach it? The truth is, growth does not come from shame. It comes from clarity. When you stop fighting yourself, your energy is no longer wasted on self-judgment. That energy becomes available for real transformation. Compassion does not make us lazy. It makes us strong because it roots us in truth rather than illusion. Think of a garden. If you scream at the soil, demanding it produce faster, will it bloom? No. But if you water it, tend it, give it sunlight, it grows naturally. The same is true for the human heart. We cannot shame ourselves into blooming. We can only love ourselves into growth. And yet, releasing shoulds is not a one-time act. It is a practice. Each day, the voices will return. They will tell you, you should have done better in that meeting. You should have looked more confident. You should not have made that mistake. Each time, you are invited to notice, to breathe, and to question. Is this voice truth? Or is it just a story? Does it help me grow? Or does it chain me down? With practice, you learn to distinguish between wisdom and the harsh critic. Wisdom guides with clarity. The critic only wounds. This practice reveals something profound. Our worth has never been in question. It was never dependent on success, appearance, or perfection. It is inherent, unshakable, woven into our being. Like the sky, it does not vanish when clouds appear. Like the ocean, it remains vast even when waves crash. When we see this, the shoulds lose their power. They may whisper, but we no longer bow to them. And in that freedom, we begin to live differently. We take risks without fear of failing, because failure no longer defines us. We rest without guilt, because rest is no longer seen as weakness. We speak honestly, because we are no longer trying to perform a role. Life becomes lighter, more authentic, more real. But perhaps the greatest gift of releasing shoulds is the ability to be present. When you are no longer editing yourself, you can finally experience yourself. When you are no longer rehearsing who you should be, you can finally live who you are. And who you are, beneath the layers of judgment, is already whole. Still, another trap waits ahead. Once we release shoulds, the mind may swing to the opposite extreme. It may say, if I don't need to prove myself, then nothing matters. If I don't need to strive, I will abandon all effort. If I don't need to be strong, I will collapse into weakness. This is the danger of extremes, the belief that freedom lies at one edge or the other. But wisdom reminds us, truth is rarely at the edges. Truth lives in balance. Too much self-denial suffocates us. Too much indulgence drowns us. Too much striving burns us out. Too much apathy leaves us empty. The path is neither harsh asceticism nor reckless indulgence. The path is the middle way. The middle way teaches us that freedom is not found in pushing ourselves into extremes, but in walking steadily between them. It is not about avoiding effort, nor about exhausting ourselves. It is about harmony, discipline balanced with gentleness, joy balanced with awareness, growth balanced with rest. Imagine a tightrope walker. If they lean too far left, they fall. If they lean too far right, they fall. Their freedom is not in clinging to one side, but in finding balance step by step. This is how we must walk through life, not chasing the illusion of perfection, not collapsing into despair, but choosing in each moment the steady middle ground where wisdom can breathe. As we step into this next teaching, we begin to see that peace is not about swinging wildly between extremes. It is about learning to stand where life is most alive, right in the middle, right in balance, right in the truth of this moment. When we think about life, the mind often moves like a pendulum. It swings from one side to the other, from indulgence to denial, from pushing too hard to giving up entirely. We believe that if one extreme has hurt us, then the answer must be its opposite. We say, if work has exhausted me, I will abandon effort completely. Or, if pleasure has led me astray, I must cut off every joy. But each swing brings only more imbalance, more confusion. This is the trap of extremes, and it is one of the deepest sources of suffering. The Buddha knew this well. Before his awakening, he lived both extremes. As a young prince, he enjoyed wealth, luxury, and every pleasure his palace could offer. Yet he felt empty, restless, unfulfilled. Later, as a wandering ascetic, he practiced severe denial fasting until his body wasted, pushing himself through harsh practices, believing that suffering would unlock truth. Yet this too left him weak, nearly dead, and still far from peace. It was only when he abandoned both extremes that he discovered the middle way, the path of balance that led to liberation. The middle way is not a compromise between indulgence and denial. It is something deeper. It is the wisdom of harmony, of walking a path that honors discipline without cruelty, joy without attachment, and effort without obsession. It is the understanding that freedom is not found in clinging to extremes, but in moving steadily, gently, in the space between. Think of a musical instrument. If the string is too tight, it snaps. If it is too loose, it makes no sound. Only when it is tuned to the right tension does it create music. Our lives are like this. Too much tension, rigidity, self-punishment, endless striving breaks us. Too little tension, laziness, indulgence, avoidance leaves us dull, lifeless. The middle way tunes the string of our life so that it can sing. Yet in the modern world, extremes are often celebrated. We are told to push harder, work longer, hustle until we collapse. Or we are told to escape, to avoid responsibility, to drown ourselves in distraction and comfort. Balance, meanwhile, is rarely praised. It is quieter. It does not shout, But it is in balance that true freedom lies. For in balance, we are not slaves to either edge. We are steady, present, alive. Consider the person who works endlessly, sacrificing sleep, health, and relationships in pursuit of success. They may achieve much, but inside they feel hollow, disconnected, weary. Then consider the person who avoids all responsibility, drifting from one pleasure to another, never committing, never growing. They may feel temporary comfort, but inside they feel aimless, lost, unfulfilled. Both are trapped. Both are bound by extremes. Only in the middle in effort balanced with rest, in discipline balanced with joy, can a life be truly whole. The middle way is also about how we treat ourselves. Many of us swing between harsh self-criticism and careless neglect. When we fail, we punish ourselves. When we succeed, we demand more. Or, in moments of despair, we swing to the other side, abandoning ourselves completely, numbing with distraction. But what if we stopped swinging? What if we chose a steadier kindness? What if we could hold ourselves accountable without cruelty and rest without guilt? That is the balance of the middle way. It is not easy to walk this path. The pull of extremes is strong. Discipline feels safer when it is rigid. Pleasure feels tempting when it is excessive. But both are traps. The middle way asks for something subtler, listening. Listening to the body when it is tired, but also listening when it is capable of more. Listening to the heart when it longs for joy, but also listening when joy becomes grasping. Listening to life itself, moment by moment, without forcing it into extremes. One way to imagine this is through the image of a boat on a river. If you row too hard, you exhaust yourself. If you do nothing, the current may push you into rocks. But if you find the rhythm rowing gently, guiding steadily, you move with the river. You travel without strain, without danger, in harmony with the flow. That is the middle way, not controlling the river, not surrendering blindly, but learning to move with wisdom and balance. And the gift of the middle way is freedom from unnecessary suffering. When we cling to extremes, we suffer twice, once from life itself and once from our rigid response to it. But when we rest in balance, suffering softens. We no longer demand that life be all one thing or another. We accept its nuance, its complexity, its rhythm. We find peace not by escaping the world, but by moving within it wisely. So pause now and ask yourself, where do I live in extremes? Do I overwork until I collapse, then swing into avoidance? Do I demand perfection, then punish myself when I fail? Do I cling to joy desperately, then fall into despair when it fades? Notice these patterns. Notice how exhausting they are. And then imagine walking a steadier path. Imagine working with care, but also resting without guilt. Imagine enjoying pleasure without needing to cling. Imagine holding discipline without cruelty. This is not a fantasy. It is the invitation of the middle way. And as we begin to walk this path, we find that balance does not make life dull. On the contrary, it makes life more vivid. Without extremes pulling us back and forth, we can finally notice the subtle beauty of each moment. We can taste food without overeating. We can rest without laziness. We can work without burning out. We can love without chains. The middle way reveals that freedom is not in excess or deprivation, but in the harmony of enough. This balance, however, will be tested by one of life's deepest truths, impermanence. Even when we find harmony, life will shift. Things will end. People will change. Bodies will age. The world itself will move on. To live in balance, we must face impermanence not as an enemy, but as a teacher. That is the next step of our journey, to embrace the dance of impermanence with open hands and open heart. The middle way is not a theory to admire from a distance. It is a path to walk moment by moment. And like any path, it asks for practice. Every day, we are pulled toward extremes. We are told to push harder, achieve more, prove ourselves at any cost. Or we are tempted to withdraw completely, to numb with distraction, to hide from responsibility. The invitation of the middle way is to pause and ask, what is true right now? What brings balance in this moment? Balance is not static. It shifts like the body of a dancer, adjusting constantly to stay steady. Some days, discipline is what brings balance. Other days, rest is what brings balance. Some moments call for effort, others for letting go. To walk the middle way is to listen carefully, to stay awake, to respond with wisdom instead of habit. Consider food. One extreme is indulgence eating without awareness, using food to numb emotions, consuming far beyond what the body needs. The other extreme is denial starving, punishing the body, fearing every bite. Both lead to suffering. The middle way honors the body. It eats with attention, with gratitude, with balance. It nourishes without clinging, enjoys without grasping. The same principle applies to every aspect of life. Work is another example. On one side lies overwork, the endless hustle, the constant sacrifice of health and relationships. On the other side lies avoidance, drifting without responsibility, neglecting growth. Both are traps. The middle way is steady effort, balanced with rest. It is giving your best without burning out, contributing without forgetting to live. Relationships, too, can fall into extremes. We may cling too tightly, demanding constant validation, turning love into possession. Or we may withdraw completely, avoiding intimacy, hiding behind walls of fear. Both create pain. The middle way is love without chains, caring deeply while allowing freedom, connecting fully without trying to control. And even within spiritual practice, extremes appear. Some push themselves with rigid discipline, treating meditation like a competition, believing suffering is proof of progress. Others drift into complacency, using spirituality as an escape, never committing, never practicing deeply. But the middle way reminds us that the path is not about extremes of effort or avoidance. It is about steady presence, consistent practice, gentle persistence. When we begin to live this way, something shifts inside. Life no longer feels like a battlefield of opposites. It feels like a river. Sometimes it flows swiftly, sometimes slowly, sometimes calm, sometimes rough. But instead of fighting it or abandoning it, we learn to move with it. We guide ourselves with wisdom, adjusting when needed, but never forgetting that we are part of the river, not separate from it. The middle way is not always easy. Our culture rewards extremes. People admire those who sacrifice everything for success, even if it destroys them. Others admire those who reject all responsibility, imagining it as freedom. Balance rarely receives applause because it is quieter, subtler, less dramatic. But though it may not attract attention, it brings peace. And peace is worth more than any applause. Not to live in balance is to trust that wisdom is not found in shouting, but in listening. Not in excess, but in enough. Not in swinging wildly, but in walking steadily. And when we do this, life begins to feel lighter. Choices feel clearer. The heart feels steadier. We begin to taste a freedom that is not fragile, because it does not depend on extremes, but even balance has its challenge. For even when we live in harmony, life itself is always changing. Balance does not mean we can stop change. It means we can meet change without losing ourselves. And this brings us to one of the most difficult truths of all: impermanence. Everything changes. Our bodies, our relationships, our fortunes, our dreams. Seasons shift, people leave, even the breath we take in must eventually leave us. The mind resists this truth. It wants to freeze joy, to control outcomes, to cling to what feels safe. But impermanence is not optional. It is the very fabric of life. And if we do not learn to embrace it, we will always suffer. The middle way prepares us for this next step. For only a balanced heart can face impermanence without fear. Only a steady mind can love without clinging, grieve without collapsing, and let go without despair. This is the next doorway we must walk through, the dance of impermanence, where freedom is not in stopping change, but in flowing with it. One of the most challenging truths to face is impermanence. We know it in our minds, yet our hearts resist it. Everything changes. Everything passes. Every joy, every sorrow, every breath. The flower blooms, then fades. The child grows, then leaves. The body is strong, then weakens. The seasons turn without asking our permission. Yet still, deep inside, we cling to the hope that something will last forever. We cling to the idea that if we hold tightly enough, perhaps this time nothing will change. But life does not work that way. The very nature of life is movement, transformation, constant unfolding. To fight this is like trying to hold water in our fists. The tighter we squeeze, the faster it slips away. And yet, this is what we do every day. We cling to moments of joy, desperate to freeze them. We resist moments of pain, desperate to escape them. In both cases, we suffer. Not because of the change itself, but because of our resistance to it. Imagine sitting on a beach, watching the waves. One rises high, sparkling in the sun, then crashes and disappears. Another follows, different yet connected. If you demand that the beautiful waves stay forever, you will suffer when it falls. If you demand that the stormy wave never come, you will suffer when it does. But if you accept that waves rise and fall, you can enjoy their rhythm. You can play, you can swim, you can rest, without demanding the ocean obey your desires. Life is like this ocean. Impermanence is its tide. This truth can feel frightening. We fear loss, we fear endings, we fear the unknown that comes with change. But what if impermanence is not an enemy, but a gift? What if the fleeting nature of things is what makes them precious? A flower that bloomed forever would no longer move us. A sunset that never ended would become ordinary. A child who never grew would never reveal their full beauty. It is impermanence that gives life its sweetness. Think of love. When we know that time is short, we hold our loved ones closer. When we know that moments are fragile, we treasure them. It is not despite impermanence that love matters, it is because of it. The awareness that everything passes awakens gratitude. It calls us to be present, to notice, to cherish what is here before it is gone. The Buddha taught that clinging to permanence is one of the deepest illusions of the human mind. We build identities, relationships, and plans as if they were fixed. But reality always shifts. This is why suffering comes not from change itself, but from the refusal to accept it. If we can open to impermanence, even with trembling hands, suffering softens. We learn to flow with life rather than fight it. Consider the story of two friends walking through autumn woods. One laments, "Look at the leaves, they are dying. It is so sad." The other smiles, "Look at the colors, they are so beautiful." Both see the same trees, the same falling leaves. But one resists impermanence, while the other embraces it. Which one suffers less? Which one sees more deeply? The leaves will fall regardless. The difference is whether we see decay or transformation, loss or beauty. Embracing impermanence does not mean we stop feeling. It does not mean we avoid grief. When we lose someone we love, pain is natural. Tears are natural. What impermanence teaches is that pain itself will also pass. No storm lasts forever. Even the deepest grief changes, softens, evolves. Knowing this gives us courage. We can walk through sorrow without despair because we trust that change will come again. Impermanence also frees us from clinging to identity. Many of us define ourselves by roles: parent, partner, professional, achiever. But these roles shift. The parent becomes an empty nester. The professional retires. The achiever finds a new dream. If we cling to any single identity as permanent, we suffer when it dissolves. But if we understand that we are more than any role, that we are fluid, spacious, changing, then we can meet each stage with openness. We can discover new ways of being without fear. And impermanence frees us from clinging to failure as well. How many times do we say, "This mistake will define me forever. This shame will never leave"? But nothing is fixed, not even our wounds. With time, with awareness, with compassion, even the deepest scars can transform into wisdom. Impermanence means that no failure is final. Every moment carries the seed of renewal. In the modern world, we often resist impermanence more than ever. We spend billions trying to freeze youth, to preserve beauty, to extend control. We build technology that promises permanence, digital archives that will never fade. But even these will pass. Even the strongest structures will one day crumble. To deny this is to live in constant anxiety, always running from the inevitable. To accept it is to relax, to breathe, to find peace in the truth that nothing needs to last forever in order to be valuable. So pause now and ask yourself, what am I clinging to as if it could last forever? A relationship? A possession? An image of myself? A moment of joy? Notice the tension that comes with that clinging. Notice the fear of losing. Then imagine loosening your grip. Imagine saying, "Yes, this may pass. Yes, this may change. But while it is here, I will cherish it fully." That is the practice of impermanence. That does not make life less meaningful. It makes it infinitely more so. For when we accept that every moment is fleeting, we stop postponing our living. We stop waiting for a perfect future. We stop demanding that things stay the same. Instead, we step into the richness of now. We laugh louder. We love deeper. We forgive quicker. Because we know this too will pass. And that is not a threat. It is a blessing. And yet, there is a deeper lesson still. If impermanence touches everything, then it must also touch love itself. Many of us believe love must be permanent to be real. We cling to people, demanding they stay forever, believing their presence is the guarantee of our happiness. But true love is not possession. True love is compassion, offered freely, without chains. To love with impermanence in mind is to love more purely, because we do not demand forever. We only cherish now. And in cherishing now, we discover a love that cannot be broken by change. This is where our journey must lead next, into the freedom of love without chains, compassion that is not conditional, care that does not demand permanence. For only when we embrace impermanence can we open to a love that is truly free. To embrace impermanence fully, we must allow ourselves to feel both its sweetness and its sorrow. It is sweet because it reminds us to treasure the moment. It is sorrowful because it asks us to release what we love. Both truths live side by side. We cannot have one without the other. The beauty of the sunrise is tied to its passing. The depth of love is tied to the fact that it cannot be held forever. This is why impermanence is not meant to be denied, but to be honored. Many people believe that if they accept impermanence, they will lose their joy. They fear that if everything changes, then nothing matters. But the opposite is true. When we accept impermanence, everything matters more. Each laugh becomes priceless. Each touch becomes sacred. Each ordinary day becomes a miracle. We stop sleepwalking through life. We begin to see the extraordinary hidden in the ordinary, because we know it will not last forever. Think of a candle. If it burned endlessly, we would stop noticing its light. But because we know it will burn out, we sit closer, we appreciate the glow, we savor the warmth. Impermanence does not steal the light, it makes it shine brighter. This truth also helps us face fear. Many of our deepest anxieties come from the belief that pain will last forever. We think, I will always feel this way. This grief will never end. This failure will define me forever. But impermanence whispers otherwise. It reminds us that everything moves, everything shifts. Just as joy fades, so too does sorrow. Just as spring turns to winter, winter turns again to spring. When we remember this, hope returns. We can endure the storm because we know it is not the final sky. Impermanence also softens our anger. When we are hurt, we often cling to the wound, replaying it, feeding it, telling ourselves the story again and again. But when we remember that even anger is impermanent, we do not need to keep it alive. We can let it rise, let it fall, let it pass. This does not excuse harm, but it frees us from carrying poison in our own hearts. The Buddha often used the image of the breath. Each inhale arises, each exhale fades. If you try to cling to the inhale, you suffocate. If you refuse to release the exhale, you collapse. Life itself is this rhythm. Impermanence is not just an idea, it is our very breath. To fight it is to fight living itself. To embrace it is to flow with the natural rhythm of existence. And this embrace leads us into compassion. When we realize that all beings are subject to impermanence, our hearts open. We see that everyone we meet is carrying the weight of change, aging, losing, struggling, longing. We realize that no one escapes impermanence. Not the wealthy, not the powerful, not even ourselves. This recognition softens judgment and awakens kindness. We see others not as competitors, but as companions in a fragile, fleeting journey. To love in the face of impermanence is to love without chains. It is to say, I know you will change, and I will change, and one day we may part. But while we are here, I will love you fully, without demand, without clinging. This kind of love is deeper than possession. It does not grasp, because it knows grasping cannot stop change. It does not demand forever, because it knows forever is not promised. It simply loves freely, fully, now. Such love is not fragile, it is strong. For it is rooted not in illusions of permanence, but in the truth of impermanence. It is not afraid of endings, because it knows that endings are also beginnings. It does not collapse when change comes, because it was never based on control. It was based on freedom. And this is where impermanence transforms from a source of fear into a doorway to wisdom. When we cling, impermanence feels like a thief. But when we release, impermanence becomes a teacher. It teaches us gratitude. It teaches us resilience. It teaches us compassion. It teaches us to love without fear. So pause and reflect. Where in your life have you been fighting impermanence? Do you cling to youth, wishing the years would not pass? Do you hold to possessions, wishing they would never fade? Do you demand that relationships never change, that people never grow, that nothing ever end? Notice the suffering this brings. And then imagine shifting your gaze. Imagine welcoming impermanence as a friend. Imagine saying, yes, this will pass, and that is why I will live it fully. Yes, this will change, and that is why I will love without delay. This shift does not make us weaker. It makes us more alive. It makes us braver. For once we accept that nothing lasts, we no longer waste time pretending otherwise. We live, we love, we forgive, we act. We stop postponing joy until tomorrow, because we know tomorrow may be different. We stop holding back our kindness, because we know the chance may not come again. Impermanence becomes the fire that lights our urgency to live with depth, with meaning, with heart. And as we walk further on this path, the question arises, if all things are impermanent, what remains? If everything changes, is there anything we can trust? The teachings point us to something beyond possessions, beyond expectations, beyond even impermanence itself, the practice of compassion and the awakening of true freedom. For while the world shifts, the heart can still open. And that opening is the doorway to liberation. When we finally accept impermanence, the heart begins to soften. We realize that every person we meet, no matter how different they seem, is also walking through the same fragile, fleeting world. They too are touched by aging, by loss, by uncertainty. They too long for love, for safety, for peace. In this recognition, something awakens within us. Compassion is more than pity, more than kindness. It is the deep understanding that we are not separate, that the suffering of others is not foreign but shared. When we see clearly that we ourselves suffer, that our loved ones suffer, that even those we dislike suffer, our hearts begin to open. Compassion is not a duty to be forced. It is a natural response when the illusion of separation dissolves. Imagine standing in a crowded train. At first, you are annoyed by the stranger who bumps your shoulder, by the child who cries, by the person who talks too loudly. But then you pause. You notice the tiredness in the stranger's eyes. You see the worry in the parent's face. You hear the loneliness in the loud voice. Suddenly, annoyance fades. In its place arises a gentle tenderness. You realize they are not obstacles in your life, they are fellow travelers. This is compassion. That compassion transforms the way we move through the world. Without it, we live in constant conflict, always defending, always resenting, always fearing others. With it, we live in connection. The barriers of me and them grow thinner. Life becomes less about competing and more about caring. And in caring, we find peace. But compassion is not always easy. Our minds are quick to judge, quick to divide. We tell ourselves, this person deserves my kindness, but that one does not. This one is my friend, but that one is my enemy. Yet if impermanence has taught us anything, it is that everyone is vulnerable. Everyone is changing. Everyone is struggling. No one escapes the fragility of life. If we withhold compassion, we only add to the suffering that already exists. If we extend it, we create the possibility of healing. The Buddha often spoke of compassion using the image of a mother. A mother does not love her child because the child is perfect. She loves because the child is hers, because the bond of life itself calls forth care. Imagine extending that same love outward, not only to your family, not only to your friends, but to all beings, to strangers, to those who hurt you, even to yourself. This is boundless compassion. But we may ask, how do we practice this in daily life? Compassion begins small. It begins with noticing. When someone cuts you off in traffic, instead of reacting with anger, you pause and consider. Perhaps they are rushing to a hospital. Perhaps they're lost in grief. When a colleague snaps at you, instead of snapping back, you pause and remember. Perhaps they are carrying a burden unseen. When you yourself make a mistake, instead of drowning in self-criticism, you pause and whisper, I too am human. I too deserve care. Each of these pauses is compassion in action. Each moment of patience, each gesture of kindness is a seed. Over time, those seeds grow into a habit, a way of being. Compassion is not a switch to flip. It is a practice to cultivate, and compassion does not mean weakness. It does not mean allowing harm or avoiding boundaries. True compassion can be fierce. It can say no when no is needed. It can protect without hatred. It can stand firm without cruelty. Compassion is not about being soft. It is about being real, about responding to suffering with wisdom, not with more suffering. Think of fire. Left unchecked, it burns and destroys. But harnessed, it warms and protects. Our hearts are like this. Without compassion, they burn with anger, jealousy, greed. With compassion, they warm the world. They light the path. And here is the great paradox. Compassion does not only heal others, it heals us. When we hold anger, resentment, hatred, the one most harmed is ourselves. We poison our own hearts. We close our own doors. But when we extend compassion, even to those who hurt us, we free ourselves. We release the chains of bitterness. We step out of the prison of resentment. Compassion is not just a gift we give, it is freedom we claim. Yet many people resist compassion for themselves. They believe it is selfish, indulgent, weak. They say, I can care for others, but I must be hard on myself. But if you deny compassion to yourself, how can you truly offer it to others? A dry well cannot quench anyone's thirst. Self-compassion is not selfish. It is the foundation of all compassion. When we treat ourselves with kindness, we learn how to treat the world with kindness. So pause now and reflect. Where can compassion enter your life? Is there someone you have judged harshly? Someone you could instead meet with understanding? Is there a wound in yourself you have neglected and now calls for gentle care? Is there a stranger whose story you do not know, but whose humanity is the same as yours? Each of these is an opening. Each of these is an invitation. Compassion is the flowering of wisdom. It is the heart's response to the truth of impermanence, the truth of suffering, the truth of shared humanity. It is not abstract. It is as simple as a kind word, a patient breath, a moment of listening. And yet, its power is immense. Compassion transforms lives, not only the lives of those who receive it, but also the lives of those who give it. As we continue this journey, compassion will guide us into an even deeper truth. For when we open our hearts to others, when we see the web of connection that binds us all, we begin to realize that our suffering is not just about possessions, expectations, or impermanence. Much of our suffering arises from clinging to the past, from carrying old wounds like chains around our necks. To truly live with compassion, we must learn the art of release, the ability to let go of the past and step into the freedom of the present. Compassion deepens as we practice it, but it also challenges us. It asks us to soften where we have hardened, to open where we have closed. This is not always easy. Some wounds are deep. Some betrayals cut to the bone. Some stories of pain replay in our minds again and again, as if carved into stone. And yet, compassion whispers that even here, even in the hardest places, healing is possible. To see this clearly, we must remember, compassion is not a feeling we wait for. It is a choice we make. Sometimes the heart does not want to forgive, does not want to understand. Sometimes anger feels safer than tenderness. But if we wait until compassion arrives naturally, we may wait forever. Compassion begins as a practice. We choose it again and again, even when it feels unnatural. Over time, the practice reshapes the heart. Consider the story of a monk who was once imprisoned unjustly. He was beaten, humiliated, left in darkness for years. When finally released, someone asked him, "How did you survive without hatred?" The monk replied, "I nearly didn't. Many times I felt hatred rise, burning in my chest. But each time I remembered, if I let hatred live in me, then they have imprisoned me twice. So I chose compassion, not for their sake, but for mine." This story reveals a profound truth. Compassion is freedom. It frees us from the chains of anger, bitterness, and resentment. It does not erase the wrong. It does not excuse the harm, but it releases us from being bound to it. Without compassion, the wound remains open forever. With compassion, the wound can begin to close. And this is where compassion connects to forgiveness. Forgiveness is often misunderstood. Many believe it means saying, "What you did was okay," but that is not forgiveness. Forgiveness is not agreement. Forgiveness is release. It is the decision to stop carrying the fire that burns us. It is the choice to lay down the weight of the past so that we can walk freely into the present. But forgiveness begins with ourselves. Many of us hold grudges not only against others, but against our own hearts. We replay mistakes, replay failures, replay words we wish we could take back. We say to ourselves, "I should have known better. I should have done better. I should not have been so weak." These inner wounds can be deeper than anything inflicted from outside. And yet, compassion invites us to whisper, "I forgive myself. I was human. I made mistakes, as all humans do. I am allowed to begin again." This self-forgiveness is not indulgence. It is not denial. It is truth. For if impermanence teaches us anything, it is that we are never frozen in one moment. We are always changing, always becoming. No failure is final. No mistake defines us forever. The past is not a prison unless we lock ourselves inside it. Forgiveness is the key that opens the door. And when we begin to forgive ourselves, we find it easier to forgive others. We realize that everyone acts from ignorance, from fear, from pain. We realize that every person, no matter how harmful their actions, is also a being caught in suffering. This does not excuse harm. It does not mean we allow harm to continue. But it allows us to release hatred, to see the other not as a monster, but as another fragile human, lost in their own struggle. This is the power of compassion. It reveals that beneath anger is pain, beneath cruelty is fear, beneath judgment is ignorance. And when we see this, the heart cannot help but soften. The walls of us and them begin to crumble. We realize that we are all in the same fragile boat, floating on the same impermanent sea. Yet compassion does not only live in grand gestures. It lives in small moments. In the patience of listening when someone is struggling. In the smile offered to a stranger. In the gentle words spoken to ourselves after a mistake. These small acts, repeated day after day, create a ripple effect. They transform not only our hearts, but the world around us. For compassion is contagious. When we receive it, we are inspired to give it. When we give it, others are softened to do the same. So pause and reflect. Where is compassion needed in your life right now? Is it in a relationship that has grown cold with resentment? Is it in your own heart, weary with self-criticism? Is it toward a stranger who annoys you, but whose story you do not know? Imagine what would shift if you chose compassion in those places. Imagine the space that would open, the healing that would begin. This is where compassion leads us to release. To release our anger, our grudges, our heavy past. To stop carrying wounds that no longer serve us. For compassion is not just about softening toward others. It is about softening toward life itself. It is about letting go of the battles we fight within ourselves and stepping into a peace that does not depend on circumstances. And so, as compassion blooms in us, we are ready for the next lesson. For much of our suffering does not come from what is happening now, but from what has already happened. We cling to old hurts, old regrets, old stories, dragging them like chains behind us. To truly live with compassion, we must learn the art of letting go of the past. Only then can we walk freely into the present. There was once a monk who owned a simple porcelain teacup. He had carried it for years, using it every day. One morning, while washing it, the cup slipped from his hands and shattered into pieces on the stone floor. A student nearby gasped and said, "Master, your favorite cup is gone." The monk smiled gently and replied, "No, it was already broken." This story holds a truth many of us struggle to accept. Everything we cling to, Whether a cup, a moment, or a memory is already fragile, already changing, already on its way to passing. The monk did not mean he was careless. He meant he lived with awareness of impermanence. He did not resist what had already been written into the nature of things. But for most of us, letting go is not so simple. We hold on tightly to the past old hurts, old identities, old regrets, as if carrying them could somehow protect us. Instead, they weigh us down. We replay conversations from years ago, words spoken in anger or carelessness, and each time the wound reopens. We cling to mistakes, convincing ourselves they define who we are. We hold grudges, refusing to release those who wronged us, even though the poison burns us more than it burns them. Why do we cling so fiercely? Because the past feels safe in its familiarity. Even if it is painful, at least it is known. Letting go means stepping into uncertainty. It means trusting that we can live without the weight we have carried so long. It means daring to believe we are more than our stories, more than our scars. Yet the truth remains. The past is already gone. We cannot change it. We cannot rewrite it. We can only change our relationship to it. And that begins with the courage to release. Think of your mind like a room. Each memory, each regret, each old wound is like a piece of furniture. Some are useful, shaping who you are. But many are broken, sharp, heavy. Instead of clearing them, we leave them piled in corners, cluttering the space, making it hard to move freely. Letting go is not erasing the room. It is clearing what no longer serves, so that the space can breathe again. But letting go does not mean forgetting. It does not mean pretending the past never happened. It means releasing the hold it has on us. It means saying, yes, this happened. Yes, it shaped me. But it does not have to define me. I choose to step forward, lighter. The Buddha taught that clinging to the past is like carrying a heavy boat long after you have crossed the river. The boat served its purpose, but once you are on the other shore, you no longer need it. Yet many of us carry our boats everywhere, wondering why life feels so heavy. Letting go is setting down the boat. It is honoring the journey it gave us, but recognizing that it no longer needs to be carried. Forgiveness plays a central role here. To forgive does not mean to erase the wound or to excuse what was wrong. It means to release the chain that ties us to it. When we forgive, we are not setting the other free, we are setting ourselves free. Holding a grudge is like drinking poison and waiting for the other person to suffer. Forgiveness is pouring out the poison and choosing life instead. But perhaps the hardest forgiveness is toward ourselves. Many carry years of self-blame. I should have known better. I should not have failed. I should not have hurt them. These voices echo endlessly, keeping us trapped. Letting go means speaking back to those voices with compassion. It means saying, yes, I made mistakes. Yes, I was imperfect. But I am human, and I am allowed to begin again. And here is where mindfulness becomes our tool. The mind loves to wander back to the past, to replay the same painful stories. Mindfulness teaches us to notice when this happens and to gently return to the present. Each time we return, we loosen the grip of the past. Each time we return, we remind ourselves, the only place life is truly lived is here now. Imagine standing in a garden, but with your back turned, staring at a dead tree behind you. You keep staring, grieving its withered branches. Meanwhile, flowers bloom at your feet, sunlight warms your skin, birds sing in the trees ahead. But you miss it all because your gaze is fixed on what has already ended. This is what happens when we cling to the past. Life blooms now, but we are too busy looking backward to see it. Letting go does not mean we stop remembering. Memories can still be honored, lessons can still be kept, but they become like photographs in an album, things we can look at with gratitude or wisdom, not chains we must drag with us. We carry the wisdom, not the weight. So pause and reflect. What in your past still holds you captive? Is it a regret, a loss, a betrayal, a version of yourself you no longer are? Notice how heavy it feels. Notice how much energy it takes to keep carrying it. And imagine, even for a moment, setting it down. Imagine the relief. Imagine the space that opens in your heart. This is what letting go offers. Not erasure, but freedom. And in that freedom, we are able to meet life as it is, not as it was. We are able to love more fully because our hearts are no longer crowded with old pain. We are able to see more clearly because our eyes are no longer clouded by old stories. We are able to live more deeply because our energy is no longer drained by what has already passed. This is the gift of release. It is not easy, but it is possible. And with each act of letting go, we step more fully into the present. We discover that peace is not something we must wait for. It is something we can create, here and now, by loosening the chains of yesterday. But the practice of release must go further still. For many of us, the past we carry is not only personal. It is collective. It is cultural. It is generational. To truly be free, we must learn not only to let go of our own stories, but also the inherited stories of pain that bind entire communities. And this too begins with compassion and with the willingness to say, the past may have shaped me, but it does not have to define my future. Letting go of the past is often described as simple, but simple does not mean easy. The mind clings to familiar stories, even painful ones, because they give us a sense of identity. We say, I am the one who was betrayed, or I am the one who failed, or I am the one who lost everything. These stories may be heavy, but they are known, and the mind is afraid of what will happen if we put them down. Who will I be without my pain? But the truth is this: we are not our pain. We are not our past. We are more spacious than any single story, more alive than any single mistake. The moment we loosen our grip, even slightly, we discover that the past does not disappear. It simply takes its rightful place as a teacher, not a jailer. Think of a traveler carrying a sack of stones. Each stone represents a memory, a regret, a wound. The traveler believes they must carry it all, that the weight is who they are. But as they continue, their back aches, their steps slow, their vision narrows. One day, a teacher tells them, try setting down one stone. Reluctantly, the traveler drops a single rock. To their surprise, they feel lighter. The journey feels easier. Encouraged, they let go of another and another. They realize the sack does not define them. They are still themselves, but now freer, stronger, more able to walk forward. This is how release works. It does not happen all at once. It happens stone by stone, story by story, moment by moment. Each act of letting go is an act of courage. Each act of letting go is an act of faith that we are more than our burdens, that life is waiting beyond the weight. One of the most powerful ways to practice this is through forgiveness rituals. Some people write down what they need to release: an old hurt, a regret, a name they have carried in anger, and then burn the paper, watching the smoke rise as a symbol of letting go. Others sit in meditation and imagine placing their pain into a river, watching the current carry it away. These rituals do not erase the past, but they create a space in the heart. They remind us that we can choose release. Release also requires patience. We may think we have let go, only to find the memory return, the wound reopen. This does not mean we have failed. It means the layers are deep, and healing takes time. Each time the memory arises, we are invited again. Will you carry this, or will you release it? Each choice to release, even if small, weakens the chain. Eventually, the grip loosens for good, and we must remember that letting go does not dishonor the past. Some fear that if they stop carrying their pain, they will forget the people they lost or the lessons they learned. But letting go is not forgetting. It is transforming. It is saying, I carry the love, not the grief. I carry the wisdom, not the regret. I carry the strength, not the wound. The past becomes part of us in a new way, lighter, freer, more alive. In truth, letting go is not about abandoning the past. It is about embracing the present. For as long as we are trapped in yesterday, we cannot fully live today. The laughter around us is muted. The beauty before us is dimmed. The opportunities of now slip through our fingers while we stare backward. But when we release, the present opens. Life becomes vibrant again. We can see, hear, feel, love all without the filter of old pain. And this is the essence of freedom, to no longer be held hostage by what is already gone. To step into each new moment with open hands, not clenched fists. To meet life not with the heaviness of memory, but with the freshness of presence. So pause now and reflect. What weight are you still carrying? Whose voice echoes in your mind? Which old story defines you more than it should? Can you imagine loosening your grip, even just a little? Can you imagine setting down one stone, even if the sack is still full? Feel the possibility of that lightness. Feel the space it creates. This is the beginning of freedom. And as we taste this freedom, we are prepared for the next challenge. For even as we let go of the past, the mind remains restless. It leaps constantly into the future, worrying, planning, fearing what may come. Just as clinging to the past steals our peace, so does obsession with the future. To be truly free, we must learn not only to release yesterday, but also to rest from the endless chase of tomorrow. That is the doorway that awaits us next. Even as we learn to release the past, the mind reveals another habit, its relentless pull toward the future. Just as we cling to what has already happened, we also grasp at what has not yet come. We live in what if and what next, rarely resting in what is. This future chasing is so common that we often mistake it for normal life. But underneath, it drains us, leaving us anxious, restless, and unable to fully live the moment we are in. Think about how many of our days are consumed, not by what is happening now, but by the imagined future. We plan endlessly. What will I do tomorrow? What if this goes wrong? What if I fail? What if I succeed, but lose it later? Even in moments of joy, the mind interrupts with worry. How long will this last? What comes next? Like a restless animal, it refuses to sit still. The Buddha described this as one of the great traps of human suffering. The mind clings not only to memory, but also to anticipation. We imagine that happiness is somewhere just ahead, if only we can prepare enough, control enough, plan enough. Yet this imagined future is a mirage. When we arrive, the mind is already leaping to the next horizon. Consider the person who finally achieves the promotion they have dreamed of. For a moment, they feel satisfaction. But almost immediately, the mind whispers, what about the next step? What about more money, more status, more security? The joy fades, replaced by the same hunger. The future is never satisfied because it is never here. And so, life becomes an endless rehearsal for a play that never begins. We prepare, we worry, we imagine, but we never fully arrive. We sacrifice today for tomorrow, only to discover that tomorrow never comes. It is always another today, waiting to be lived. This future grasping often shows up as anxiety. Anxiety is the body's way of trying to live in a future it cannot control. The heart races, the breath shortens, the mind loops through scenarios. We believe that by worrying, we are protecting ourselves. But worry does not stop the future from arriving. It only steals the peace of the present. Imagine sitting in a rocking chair. You move back and forth endlessly, expending energy, but you go nowhere. This is the mind lost in the future motion without progress, effort without peace. Yet the solution is not to abandon planning entirely. The future will come, and some preparation is wise. The problem is not planning, it is clinging. It is believing that we can control every outcome, that we can secure permanent safety in a world defined by impermanence. This illusion is the root of our suffering. The middle way offers guidance here too. We can prepare without obsession. We can plan with clarity, but without allowing the plan to own us. We can dream, but without chaining our happiness to the dream's fulfillment. We can move toward the future, but still live fully in the present. One way to practice this is through mindfulness of breath. Each inhale is the future arriving. Each exhale is the past leaving. The breath anchors us in the one place that is always real, now. When anxiety about tomorrow arises, we return to the breath. We remind ourselves, the future has not yet come. The only life I can live is here. Another practice is gratitude. Anxiety focuses on what might be lost, what might go wrong. Gratitude focuses on what is already here. By naming the blessings of the present, a kind word, a safe place, a warm meal, we train the mind to rest in enough. Gratitude does not erase uncertainty, but it loosens the grip of fear. The truth is, the future will always be uncertain. No amount of worry can change that. But uncertainty does not have to be terrifying. It can also be liberating. If the future is unwritten, then anything is possible. If nothing is fixed, then we are free to meet each moment with openness. Instead of fearing change, we can welcome it as the very nature of life. Think again of the ocean waves. The past wave has already crashed. The future wave has not yet risen. The only wave we can ride is the one beneath us now. If we ignore it while waiting for the next, we miss the ride entirely. Life is the same. The only wave we can live is this one. So pause and ask yourself, how often do I live in the future? How often do I sacrifice peace today for fears or fantasies of tomorrow? Notice how exhausting this is. Notice how little control it gives you and how much it steals. Then imagine loosening your grip. Imagine saying, yes, I will plan, but I will not cling. Yes, I will prepare, but I will not obsess. I will live here, in this breath, in this step, in this moment. This shift changes everything. The mind may still wander, but each time we gently return. Each return is a victory. Each return is a taste of freedom. Over time, the habit of grasping weakens, and the habit of presence grows. And as presence deepens, we begin to taste a joy that does not depend on the past or the future. A joy that arises simply from being alive, from breathing, from noticing. This joy is not fragile because it does not depend on outcomes. It is rooted in awareness itself. But to rest here fully, we must confront one final illusion, the illusion of permanence, not just in things, not just in time, but in the self itself. For much of our suffering comes from clinging to the idea of a fixed me, a solid identity that must be protected, defended, and proven. To truly be free, we must learn to see through this illusion, to discover the spaciousness beyond the self. The pull of the future is powerful because it promises safety. The mind whispers, if I plan enough, I will be secure. If I control enough, nothing will surprise me. If I succeed enough, I will finally rest. But these promises are illusions. Life is never fully under our control. Change will come no matter how carefully we prepare. And rest does not arrive through conquering the future. It arrives through resting in the present. Think of how often we say, I'll be happy when I get the new job, when I buy the house, when I retire, when everything finally falls into place. But when the moment comes, happiness is fleeting and the mind moves the finish line. The truth is, happiness does not live in the future. It lives in our ability to meet the present with openness. When we place happiness always in the next moment, we never arrive. This does not mean we abandon our dreams. Dreams are beautiful. Goals give direction. But we must hold them lightly, like birds in open hands. If we clutch too tightly, we crush them. If we hold gently, they may soar. We can walk toward our future without letting it steal the life that is here. A simple practice is to notice when the mind leaps ahead and gently ask, is this real right now, or is it imagined? If it is real, we respond. If it is imagined, we return to the present. This question breaks the trance of worry and invites us back to what is true. Another practice is mindful action. When eating, simply eat. When walking, simply walk. When listening, simply listen. These small acts of presence train the mind to stay with what is real instead of chasing what is not yet here. Over time, the pull of the future weakens and the richness of now becomes enough. This shift does not make us careless. In fact, it makes us wiser. When we are present, we see more clearly. We make better decisions because we are not clouded by fear of what might come. Presence does not erase uncertainty, but it gives us the strength to meet uncertainty with steadiness. And here is the greatest irony. When we stop obsessing over the future, we actually prepare for it better. A calm mind makes clearer choices. A rested body has more resilience. A heart at peace has more courage. By releasing the need to control tomorrow, we become more capable of meeting it when it arrives. This is why the practice of resting in the present is not passive. It is powerful. It frees us from the chains of both past and future. It roots us in the only place where life is ever lived. It gives us the strength to meet whatever comes, not with fear, but with wisdom. But to live this way, we must go deeper still. For even when we release the past and soften our grasp on the future, another attachment remains, the attachment to a fixed self. We cling to an identity, a story of me that feels solid, permanent, unchanging. We say, this is who I am. This is my role. This is my truth. But just as the past and future are illusions when clung to, so too is this rigid sense of self. To be truly free, we must learn to see through the illusion of permanence in the self itself. The next step of our journey leads us here, to question the I we protect so fiercely, to discover the spaciousness that lies beyond the boundaries of ego, and to taste the freedom of a self that is not a prison, but a doorway into boundless being. For much of life, we carry a silent belief that there is a solid me at the center of everything. We say, this is who I am. This is my story. This is my identity. We guard it, defend it, polish it, afraid of anything that might threaten or change it. But just as the past and future slip through our fingers, so too does this fixed sense of self. The I we cling to is not permanent. It is a collection of shifting parts, memories, roles, emotions, thoughts all rising and falling, never staying the same. Think for a moment about who you were 10 years ago. Were you the same as now? Did you think the same, feel the same, dream the same? Likely not. And who you will be 10 years from now will also be different. If the self were fixed, it would not change. But it changes constantly, sometimes subtly, sometimes dramatically. A self is not a solid rock. It is more like a river, always flowing, always moving, never the same water twice. Yet we spend much of life treating the self as if it were a fortress to defend. We cling to labels: parent, professional, achiever, victim, survivor. These roles are real for a time, but none are permanent. When we cling too tightly, we suffer. The parent suffers when the children grow. The professional suffers when the career ends. The achiever suffers when success fades. If we believe our identity is fixed in these roles, we collapse when the roles shift. The Buddha taught that clinging to the illusion of a fixed self is one of the deepest roots of suffering. We believe we must protect me at all costs, and so we live in constant fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of death. But when we begin to see that the self is not solid, that it is more spacious and fluid than we imagined, fear softens. We realize that change is not a threat to who we are, because who we are was never fixed to begin with. Imagine a candle flame. Is it the same flame from one moment to the next? Or is it new in every instant, fed by the wax, fed by the air? The flame looks continuous, but it is a process, not a thing. So too with the self. It appears solid, but it is a process of thoughts, feelings, sensations, and choices, arising and passing moment by moment. This insight is not meant to make us feel lost. It is meant to set us free. If the self is not fixed, then we are not trapped by who we were yesterday. We are not bound to old mistakes. We are not limited to old identities. We are free to grow, free to change, free to become. The spaciousness of the self means that every moment carries the possibility of renewal. But to taste this freedom, we must loosen the grip of ego. Ego is the voice that says, I must always be right. I must always be admired. I must always be in control. It builds walls around us, walls of pride, walls of fear, walls of comparison. Ego believes it is protecting us, but in truth, it isolates us. It keeps us from connection, from compassion, from peace. To see through ego, we can practice humility. Humility does not mean humiliation. It does not mean thinking less of ourselves. It means seeing ourselves clearly, neither inflated nor diminished, but real. It means recognizing that just as we suffer, so do others. Just as we change, so do others. Just as we are fragile, so is every being. This recognition breaks down the illusion of separateness and opens the door to connection. Another practice is service. When we help others without seeking recognition, the ego softens. We discover that joy does not come only from protecting me, but from caring for we. Service reminds us that we are not isolated selves moving alone through the world, but part of a vast web of life, interdependent and interconnected. Seeing through the self also changes the way we face death. Much of our fear of death comes from the belief that a solid me will end. But if the self was never fixed, then what ends is not a permanent entity, but a process. Just as a flame passes its light to another candle, the process continues in ways beyond our full comprehension. Death becomes less of an ending and more of a transformation. This does not erase grief, but it softens fear. So pause now and reflect. What identities do you cling to most fiercely? Do you define yourself only by your achievements, by your failures, by your roles, by your past? Notice how heavy this is. Notice how fragile it feels to protect a fortress that is always changing. Then imagine loosening your grip. Imagine saying, I am more than any single story. I am more than any single role. I am not fixed. I am spacious, fluid, alive. Feel the freedom in that thought. This insight does not mean we lose ourselves. It means we find a deeper self, not a rigid identity, but a living presence. Not a fortress, but a flow. When we stop clinging to the illusion of a fixed self, we can finally rest. We can finally live. We can finally love without fear, because we no longer need to protect an ego that is always under threat. And as we taste this freedom, we come to the final doorway. For if we are not fixed, if the past can be released, if the future can be softened, if compassion can guide us, then what remains? What remains is presence itself, the timeless no, the living silence beneath all stories, the doorway to peace that has always been waiting. This is where our journey must lead as we step into the final teaching, the idea of a fixed self is comforting because it feels stable. We like to think, this is who I am, this is my identity, this is my story. But the truth is, we are always changing. Every breath shifts us. Every thought alters us. Every experience reshapes us. To cling to a solid self is like trying to carve a wave into stone. The more we cling, the more we suffer, because life refuses to stay still. Yet when we see through this illusion, freedom appears. If the self is not fixed, then we are not trapped by who we were yesterday. We are not defined forever by our mistakes, our titles, or even our triumphs. We are free to begin again, free to grow, free to discover new ways of being. This insight turns fear into possibility. Think of a snake shedding its skin. The old skin was real, but it was never the whole creature. It served its time, then fell away. The snake does not mourn the skin. It simply moves forward, alive and renewed. Our identities, our roles, our stories are like these skins. They serve a purpose, but they are not who we truly are. When they fall away, what remains is life itself, ever-changing, ever new. But ego resists this truth. Ego wants to be solid, important, permanent. It fears change, because change feels like death. And so ego fights. It demands recognition. It defends pride. It compares constantly, asking, am I better? Am I worse? Am I enough? This endless battle is exhausting because ego is always insecure. Deep down, it knows it is built on shifting ground. The practice is to meet ego with awareness, not hostility. We notice its whispers. I must win, I must control, I must be admired, and we breathe. We smile gently, as if noticing a child's tantrum. We do not feed it. We do not obey it. We let it rise and fall, like all else. In this way, ego loses its grip. Slowly, the fortress of self softens into openness. And in that openness, we find something profound: connection. When we are no longer obsessed with protecting me, we begin to see we. We realize that just as our own self is not solid, so too are others fluid, changing, alive. We see that we are part of a vast web of interdependence, our breath tied to the trees, our food tied to the earth, our joy tied to the kindness of strangers. We are not isolated islands. We are threads in a single tapestry. This realization awakens humility and awe. Humility, because we see we are not the center of the universe. Awe, because we see we are part of something vast and beautiful. The self is not a prison, but a doorway through it. We step into a life far larger than ego could ever imagine. And when death approaches, this insight is our greatest comfort. For if the self is not fixed, then death is not the end of a solid me. It is simply another transformation in the river of life. The body changes, the roles dissolve, the stories fade, but the flow continues. Like a wave returning to the ocean, we are not lost. We are home God, so pause and reflect. What would change if you lived less as a fortress and more as a flow? What would change if you loosened the grip of ego and allowed yourself to be spacious, fluid, alive? Imagine the relief of not needing to prove yourself, defend yourself, or define yourself. Imagine the peace of resting simply as you are, without chains, without walls. This is the final freedom. To see that we are not fixed, that we are not bound, that we are not separate. To live as part of the great river of life, moving with compassion, resting in presence, free from the illusions that once held us. And this insight leads us to the closing of our journey. For we have walked through the pains of modern life stress, fear, loss, grasping, and we have discovered the doors of freedom hidden within them. We have seen how possessions, expectations, impermanence, compassion, and release all point to the same truth, that peace is possible here and now. The path has led us not away from life, but deeper into it. And now, as we step into the conclusion, we gather these truths together so that they may guide us beyond this moment, into every breath that follows. We have walked a long path together. We began by naming the pains of modern life, the stress, the restlessness, the endless grasping for more. We looked at the clutter of possessions, the weight of expectations, the ache of regret, the fear of uncertainty. We saw how these burdens exhaust us, leaving us feeling trapped, lost, and disconnected. But step by step, we also discovered that within each pain lies a doorway. Each wound holds a teaching. Each struggle offers a chance for freedom. That we began with the practice of seeing clearly. To notice the suffering, to name it honestly, is the first act of courage. From there, we entered simplicity, the choice to live with less noise, less clutter, less proving. We saw that life is not made meaningful by what we add, but by what we release. Simplicity became the soil where clarity could grow. From simplicity, we walked into balance. We learned that extremes, whether of indulgence or denial, of striving or avoidance, only bring more suffering. The middle way, steady and gentle, showed us that true freedom lies not at the edges, but in harmony. Like the string of an instrument tuned just right, life sings when lived in balance. That balance prepared us for impermanence. We faced the truth that everything changes: joys, sorrows, bodies, relationships, even the breath itself. At first, this truth felt heavy, but then we saw its gift. Impermanence makes life precious. It teaches us gratitude. It reminds us not to waste a single moment, for each is fleeting, each is unique, each is sacred. Impermanence opened the heart to compassion. When we saw that all beings share the same fragility, the same struggles, the same impermanent nature, we could no longer close our hearts. Compassion was no longer an effort, but a natural response. It became a way of softening the world's harshness, a way of healing not only others, but ourselves. From compassion, we moved into forgiveness and release. We realized that much of our suffering comes not from what is happening now, but from what we refuse to let go of: old wounds, grudges, regrets. We learned that to forgive is not to excuse, but to set ourselves free. To release the past is to create space for the present, to trade the weight of memory for the lightness of possibility. But just as the past weighs on us, so does the future. We saw how the mind races ahead, living in fear and anticipation, always chasing a horizon it can never reach. We learned that peace is not found in controlling tomorrow, but in resting in today. Gratitude, mindfulness, and presence became our anchors, keeping us steady in the only place life is ever lived, now. And finally, we faced the deepest illusion of all: the belief in a fixed, permanent self. We saw that who we are is not a fortress to defend, but a river to flow with. We discovered that ego, with all its pride and fear, isolates us. But when we loosen its grip, we find connection. We find humility. We find that we are part of something vast and interdependent, a tapestry of life larger than any single eye. In this insight, fear of change softens, fear of death softens, and life itself opens. All of these teachings lead us here to the simple but profound truth: freedom is possible. Not a freedom that depends on circumstances, possessions, or perfection, but a freedom that lives in the heart, in the mind, in the choice to see clearly, to live simply, to walk in balance, to embrace impermanence, to cultivate compassion, to release the past, to rest from the future, to loosen the grip of ego. This freedom is not far away. It is here, in this very breath. The question then is how to live it. The answer is gentle, one step at a time. We do not need to transform everything at once. We begin where we are. We notice our clutter and take one small act of simplicity. We notice our judgments and choose one act of compassion. We notice our anxiety and return to one mindful breath. Each small act is a seed. With time, with care, the seeds grow into a new way of living. And this new way is not about escaping life, but about embracing it more fully. When we stop clinging, we can finally live. When we stop grasping, we can finally love. When we stop fearing change, we can finally rest in the miracle of each moment. This is not a dream. It is a practice. And it is available to us all. So as we close this journey, take a moment to pause. Feel your breath. Notice the ground beneath you. Notice the life moving within and around you. Everything is impermanent. Everything is fragile. Everything is precious. And you right here, right now, are part of it. Carry these teachings not as heavy rules, but as gentle companions. Let them remind you that when stress rises, there is another way. When fear comes, there is another way. When life feels too heavy, there is another way. A way of simplicity, balance, compassion, release, presence, and freedom. The path of peace is not about becoming someone else. It is about remembering who you already are beneath the noise. A being of awareness, of love, of vast possibility. This truth has always been here, waiting. And now, as you walk forward, it can light your way.